The first thing we do is we try to identify what's the level of satisfaction. Where are they in their business? Are they just doing a business that's going to grow? Are they doing a 20-year business that's really just 1 year repeated 20 years in a row? What's the measure of satisfaction? What are they trying to identify? What is the business supposed to provide for them? Most business owners will never tell you, other than the profit issue, why they do what they do.
Welcome to the Faces of Riverside 2026 podcast series, where we talk to the individuals that have been highlighted in the publication to go a little bit more in depth and learn about who they are, what they do, why they do it, and to learn a little bit more specifically about the good works. That being said, today we're joined by Tom Steele from Steele Financial Group here in Riverside. In full disclosure, Tom and I have been friends for quite some time, and I'm honored to include him in this because Tom represents something that is not in great supply today. He's able to take very complex topics and ideas around the financial world and planning and business and boil them down into very easily understood perspectives. So that being said, Tom, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Norm. Hope your day's going well.
It is. It most certainly is. It's going better now. So that being said, my friend, for the folks who have not had the opportunity and good fortune to have met you or know you personally, I want to give you an opportunity to give us just a little bit about your background and what kind of led you into the career that you have.
Excellent. So, my grandparents were first generation from Italy. And as a result, they came over here. My grandfather with $89 in his pocket, my grandmother with about $140, which back when they came over was enough to get you started, but not enough to really exist. And since I was a young boy, my grandparents have always told me about the aspects of proper financial management, that we are responsible for our own financial destiny. And that kind of came to be a cornerstone of why I wanted to get involved with finances. My family was a family of 6 children and 2 adults. My father worked 2 jobs in order to take care of us during the 50s. And I watched him kind of struggle, even though we were not wanting anything. Our needs and wants were always supplied. I did notice that over the course of his lifetime, there were tremendous amounts of financial stress. You can imagine we were also involved with parochial school, private school funding, which was paid for by both our family as well as other members of the family to help us out. But I always noticed my father and my grandfather always said the same thing. Money doesn't actually constitute the value of your life. It helps you express what it is you want to do with your life. So I was approached by actually my parents' financial advisor when I was 17, and he kept grooming me and telling me, you got to get involved in this business. You're doing the things you need to do as a young man. You need to share that with other individuals who may or may not be in a position where they have those same values. And I said, no, I don't want to. I'm doing fine. So I basically was working at a great job. I had like a 20-hour-a-week job. I was making top of the money and I was single. All of a sudden they had a let out of some of the positions for the floor that I was working. And it was either me or a 48-year-old man that was going to lose their job. I'm 20. I got money in the bank. It's summertime. I'll take the voluntary layoff. During that voluntary layoff, I went in and I tested. I tested very high for the aptitude in financial planning. They put me on a kind of a small program to see whether or not I wanted to do real well. Within about a month, I was actually making twice as what I was doing at the other job. 3 months later, they called me back to the sales floor at the other job, and I said, nope, I'm fine. I found a home. So ever since then, I've been going through the financial process. I was introduced with insurance. From insurance, I was introduced to financial planning, getting involved with investments. Then we got involved with coordinating employee benefits through work. Then we got involved with exit strategies, retirement, and pension. Then we got involved with wrapping everything up where asset protection was an important criteria because you can't keep what you truly can't protect.
Okay, well, that's a very thorough background. What a great story. Let's talk a little bit about the business side in terms of the companies that you work with. Before doing that, I do want to clarify, though, that you have been doing this as as a Steel Financial Group for more than 4 decades, and I've probably worked with thousands of customers. Is that an accurate description?
Actually, 5 decades. I know I'm younger than I actually look, but yes, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. So, yes, it's been quite a while.
Okay. Well, I tried to throw you a bone there, but you clarified it.
Hey,
50 years, 5 decades. So let's talk about some of the focus that you've had as of late in terms of working, although you've been doing it all along, but really focused on working with businesses here in the Inland Empire in particular. As a business owner myself, and you certainly have been for us, we've established now for 5 decades, we are generally pretty good at what we do in terms of having identified the product or service, bringing that product or service to the market, selling it, and earning profit as a result of that. However, my experience has been having talked to, as you might imagine, many business owners, is that despite that expertise and even longevity in many cases, they struggle with the financial side of the business. Nobody really starts their business to be a good financial manager. They start their business to sell their widget or offer the service that they offer. Why do you think that is that businesses, especially those that have been around for quite some time, still struggle with that financial side of the equation?
well, that's a great question, Norm. And the reason most people are fighting that misconception or not putting that slot in the proper hole is because they never addressed the primary question when they started their business. When do I want to quit and what is enough? You know, a lot of small business owners today are in a position where they give birth to something. And that birth, of course, is coming out of either a passion or out of a fulfillment need that they want to add to the society. Or it could be just like you said, they can do it better than the guy they're working for, so they're going to do it on their own. But the position is if you never determine in advance when you'll be done, when you'll be finished, you have no way to measure the progress. And that progress only becomes accelerated in those later years when we discover that we're getting a little too old to do what we used to do. When we start to find out we start to break down in regards to our capabilities, things have changed, we haven't kept up with it. So the primary focus is just like anything else. As an employee, you're in a position where you have somebody else maturing your exit date. You got a pension, you got a job position that's going to close down, you got a transfer that's going to happen. There's a destination associated with the company. But most employees have never become employers as business owners with that same mentality, knowing full well they have 100% control over the destiny of that closure date. And it does make it a little bit more exciting to know what a closure date is for you. How do you measure when you're done?
Well, okay, so that makes sense. But that being said, so you've identified, if I understood you correctly in your answer, that as the business goes along, as they get closer and closer to what would be an end date or a time to make a decision in terms of the succession planning of the business, that they feel that pressure and begin to look at things a little differently. But for the companies that are, and that makes sense, but for the companies that are perhaps even earlier on in their growth or development as an organization, they don't necessarily have those same pressures to look at what the future looks like. So folks in that position, do they recognize that they are not ideally financially positioned, and or is that something that your work requires illuminating that for them?
A lot of times it's sitting down with them and actually identifying what the risks and what the rewards are in regards to their efforts. A lot of individuals, when they first start off, Norman, you and I were both the same way. We're bulletproof. We can't fail. We're always going to succeed, and there's not going to be anything that's going to slow us down. Well, the dilemma is that's always predicated based on a sense of balance. There are the things that involve us, and then there are the things that include us. Many business owners spend so much of their life and so much of their time working actually in the business that they never surround themselves with like a nice protection wall of wealth, the same things that'll perpetuate all the obligations to be fulfilled, all the programs to move forward in case they are not there, because they're bulletproof. As a result, the normal things that impact a human being, such as dying too soon, being sick or disabled, a small business owner never even entertains. Most business owners, when they drag themselves in with 3 days of flu, not even being able to eat a meal, are still there showing up while their employees are at the beach or at the mountains because they have a high level of commitment. Now, that's good to have, but you also have to be realistic. Your business has to be a reflection of something that takes care of you. If you are your business, then that business circulates only on the limits of what you can provide. And those limits need to be financially insulated so the individuals can protect the people they're making the promises to, their families, their employees, and their vendors.
Okay, so you mentioned you started that answer with they sit down with you. So I want to talk about that first conversation for a minute if we can. How do you take a business owner that is operating under the this is how I've always done it mentality and get them to begin to understand that things could be done better and or done differently? Usually those two things kind of go together. What does that first conversation look like? How do you take them and embark on that journey?
Well, the first thing we do is we try to identify what's the level of satisfaction. Where are they in their business? Are they just doing a business that's going to grow? Are they doing a 20-year business that's really just 1 year repeated 20 years in a row? What's the measure of satisfaction? What are they trying to identify? What is the business supposed to provide for them? Most business owners will never tell you, other than the profit issue, why they do what they do. And the unfortunate thing is, if they're working just for profit and they're not getting maybe the satisfaction, they're going to constantly try to achieve more and more effort and energy to get what they feel is that elusive element of profit. 95% of the wisdom comes from that one gentleman that said, the best way to have a job is to do something you enjoy and get paid for it. And that's really what a lot of business owners need to reconstruct their business about. What do I really enjoy? What's my passion? What am I good at? And how can I maximize the profit so I don't get burnt out?
Okay, that seems like a very reasonable first conversation or first step of that conversation. If I can assume that beyond that first conversation, is there some more down in the weeds type of analysis that's done? What are the kind of things that you look at once you have answered those initial questions when you're talking to a business owner?
Thank you, Norm. That's a great question. One of the things you have to do is get back to the practical. Here's the obligations that I have. Here's my resources that I have. Am I in balance with my resources and my obligations? Do I truly have a program that will eliminate over time my obligations and increase the value of my resources? So the first thing we would do is look at the numbers. Let's look at what they have. Let's look at what they've started to do. Let's even review what they think they have so they can actually measure. And that's an important quality for a business owner because business owners sometimes can be elusive to the aspects of measurement. It's what they think versus what they know. And we try to bring them into that posture of what is it you truly know. By measuring what they have and putting it on paper, they can use graphs, charts, and they can use other information so they can physically see what the numbers mean.
Is there typically a big disparity based on your experience? Is there a big disparity between that think they know and what is real?
Sometimes there can be, and sometimes that difference is what the motivation or the inspiration is. They're looking at this chart when in fact this is the chart they actually get involved with. And the practicality of those two items cause a lot of frustration. And you always can tell an individual who's having a business crisis. They're doing more and more and more and more to produce the fruit, but they're doing very little to impact the tree and the roots. They're always focusing on the fruit. Sometimes you got to change the way you feed that tree and you got to change the environment in order to produce a better fruit item. Just producing more fruit only can frustrate a business owner.
That makes sense. So if you have along this, I'm going to keep referring to it as as a journey from the time that they have first sat down with you until a later time, and we'll get to that. Do many of them come to you at a time of crisis, as you mentioned, or significant change, or do they wake up at some point, even if they're still decades away from retiring and handing off the business or selling it, whatever the case may be? What typically brings them to you in the first place?
Well, and thank you, Norm. 95% of the people that are walking in through my front door are people that have already achieved that position of crises. They got something, they don't know what to do with it. They've matured into a position where now there's a dilemma. There's a decision that's been postponed for so long that it now has caused a maximum pain point. And it could be coming from a number of different arrangements. Maybe they're involved with a lawsuit from an employee. They weren't prepared for it. Maybe they're in a position where they have to regroup the business and they need new capital. They weren't prepared for it. The business suddenly went into a profit margin that was just incredible, and now the taxes are out of whack and they're not prepared for it. Usually it comes from a position where there's an unplanned event that was already built into the program that they either ignored or postponed until it reached that pain point.
So if they are contemplating or considering their options for addressing whatever this issue is that has arisen, is it based on your experience, is it common that they've been mulling over what they think are solutions to this problem when in fact the solution may be something completely different than what they've considered?
Well, business owners are very, very smart. Okay. The dilemma is whether they recognize or implement the problem solving process to what the problem is. And unfortunately, we're also, as business owners, very, very good at making nonsensical excuses and rationales that really don't apply to the real world. So, yes, to answer your question, sometimes it takes them being brought down to a practical application. How do I measure what it is I want? How do I actually evaluate what it is I need? And remember, a lot of this is in the planning stages. That's why I'm so impressed with you bringing this to new business owners. If you can start that foundational plan at the beginning of the conception of the business, they can actually already have the foundation built. So as different events occur, they can be subsequently adding these, modifying these, changing these, and grooming these to the next event. You can't build a really nice house until you got the concrete and the plumbing in. I don't care how beautiful the house is going to be. If it doesn't have a strong foundation, you're constantly reinventing the business. And that already is a tremendous amount of energy and effort for a business owner who's already strapped for time.
That makes sense. So if a business owner comes to you and more likely is referred to you by another business owner, and you sit down and have that initial conversation, you have the conversation about the difference between what they think and what they want. Maybe there's a crisis that's happening that they've been talking about and thinking about a resolution for. Once you have fully understood as best you can what the circumstances are, and recognize and are able to communicate to them that there's a need for change or modification, I'm assuming that it doesn't end there, right? There has to be some level of hand holding, for lack of a better term, to get them to begin to look at things differently, begin to implement some of the ideas and changes that you're recommending, or that the two of you or more have come up with in terms of changes.
Well, yes, what we try and do is we try to set up an identifier of what they're trying to accomplish, what's struggling or what is causing an obstacle to them achieving that. And then we set up a position of deliverables. I try to take all the problems and all the things that they want to do and put it on the side of the page. And then I try to place that into deliverables based on when they need to get it set up so that at approximately every 30 to 60 to 90 days, they can measure the accomplishment of either improving that problem or complaint, or they're in a position where they've revamped it so the complaint of the problem is already addressed, so it won't pop up again. Every business owner has got that to-do list that's sitting on the side. Implementing that to-do list into a practical application of deliverables is where you actually make the business owner take charge of his business again.
So, Tom, if you have created with them and or they've even brought some portion of it to you, a to-do list, as you just described, I imagine that, implementation is one concern and getting them to begin to take the steps that are in their own best interest and potentially the future of the business as a whole. How do you keep them on track over the long haul?
Well, most of it is done based on the client. We set up coaching calls. So basically, a couple of times a month based on where they are on their delivery. We keep in
Okay.
touch with them, ask them what they're doing. If they need a lot of intense work on a particular item, right now we're working with a fellow that is trying to refinance his building with an SBA loan, and he's in a position where he's totally befuddled by all the activity. Well, the main result that he spoke to me about was, I'm paying $9,000 right now, and you're telling me I could refinance this for seven. That's a net capital infusion of my business of $30,000 a year. Now I can redirect that into marketing without increasing any of my overhead. That was his motivation, was using money in a practical fashion to make his business more viable. So how do you do that? Find out what's going to happen, what actually he has to get involved with, supplying documents and other records, and then meeting with the individual so they can process what they need to do, and then moving on to the next item. And most of the problem, Norm, is individuals don't know how to coordinate the to-do list into a target list.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine a to-do list being somewhat ominous
Yes.
if you do not have exposure or experience to dealing with the things on that list, which clearly you don't because you weren't doing them to start with.
And remember, we have that obstacle of time and desire. If I've got to sit down and start off with a nebulous to do, and that's going to require that I invest 5 to 8 hours over the next month, that one item may be consuming individual time that I have to already commit to another problem. So what we do as business owners is we're constantly in this in this wheel of insanity where we never eliminate the problems, we just kind of postpone them, which unfortunately can sometimes create even larger problems in the future.
So are there things, and I realize this might be a difficult question to ask without a really specific example, but are there things that when you're working with a client, with a business owner who's trying to execute on this to-do list, it's not just a piece of paper that you're handing them and saying, go, and I'll call you in a month and check, right? So I assume that there are some things that you are more engaged in directly in terms of supporting them through, and other things you're coaching or just kind of nudging them along the way. Is that correct?
That is correct. The most intense thing that we need to do is find out where their gaps are. We do everything based on a predication of gaps. If you're using an accountant and you need a CPA, you need to go ahead and fill these gaps. If you haven't got an HR department to help you in regards to your employee records and programs, there's a gap. If you're in a position where you've never set up middle management so you can be distanced and actually take a vacation and not worry, there are gaps. So we try to figure out where the gaps are in regards to the program, and then create a plan that's intentional to actually close those gaps over time. Some of it is simply just integrating the same things they're doing, but in a more efficient manner.
Okay, so that's an important point, and it draws me to ask about the other individuals in their business life that they are relying on. So I'm imagining you creating a plan with them, helping them to execute on those to-do items, which requires, as I think one of the things you mentioned, integration. So I may have a CPA that I have worked with for 15 years, and it could be my brother-in-law for all intents and purposes. And maybe my brother-in-law is not the best CPA, or maybe he's fabulous. We don't know. You don't know that as of yet. So what's involved in terms of rallying the individuals that they already have in place? Even more so, what if you recognize or identify that those individuals may not be up to par in terms of being able to address the issues? How do you deal with that?
Well, Norm, you understand as well as I do that there are relationships in business. Some of the relationships are predicated based on personal relationships. Some of them are based on professional. We try to bring the employer, who's actually the boss, back into a position so he takes the same mindset as if he was looking at an employee. Does that person fill the spot with the most cost effective and the highest level of efficiency? It doesn't have anything to do with a relationship being damaged. It has to do with, am I hiring the right person? And we do tell individuals, you can keep your brother-in-law, but if you keep your brother-in-law, this is going to be the impact. This is going to be the cost. This is going to be the delay. This is going to be what you're going to have to contend with by making that choice. The consequence is always based on the two most primary focuses. Who can we introduce that's going to bring you the highest delivery of efficiency at the most reasonable or the most discounted cost, and then stay with you. And that's why you change employees. Sometimes you outgrow them, sometimes they outgrow you. Sometimes you're in a position where you're taking and hiring people under an advisory position that aren't giving you the advisory posture you need to make the next great decision, the next great leap, the next great coordination with your business. And that's pretty much the business owner not taking that command posture of quarterbacking his dreams.
So when it comes to the strategy, I'm just going to throw some terms at you and you give me some feedback because what I'm looking for ultimately is a philosophy or a model that applies generally across the board. There are things like profitability, cash flow, protection, taxation. Do you have a general philosophy or way that you look at those things that probably apply not just to even business owners, but individuals as well? Do you have some type of a philosophy around that or a model that you use?
I do. There's two aspects associated with every morning when you wake up. These are the things I have to do based on obligations. These are my resources. I always want to make sure that what I have in a resource list is at least meeting the obligations and creating a posture of a systematic plan that increases my resources while it reduces my obligations. That's a cornerstone of planning, is to know on a predictable measure how you are proceeding to reducing your obligations, either in debt, either in time management and waste, employee difficulties. What is taking your resources and not producing a reasonable return on that investment? All day long, business owners have got tons of resources that they're not using effectively, things that are available to them that they're not actually implementing. Give you an example. We had a client, he's got a 13-year-old and he's got an 18-year-old kid. The 18-year-old kid is going to college. Guess who's writing the check? Dad's writing the check. We come in, we say, why don't you hire your kid in the business? He goes, I don't want that kid in my business. I said, there's things in that business your kid can do. And now you can pay him a salary. You can enjoy some write-offs for the business. And now you can make his tax tuition, which you're going to pay for anyway, under a more inexpensive contribution by you. And now you're getting him included in the very vehicle that's helping him pay for his college. You can increase the appreciation of what you do, pay him a check, and now he's got his own way to kind of establish. Still achieving the same goal, which is subsidizing his education, but you're doing it in a tax efficient manner. I mean, it's just little simple things to kind of just look at the point, figure out what's the closest point between A and B to solve it. That's just a real practical one.
So that is a real, I would imagine for that particular example you just gave, for that business owner, that's a real aha moment for them.
Five
Something
second
that
on a
they,
decision-making process.
right, right. And something I'm certain that that individual, and you can confirm that or not, had not ever thought of as a viable option. So when you bring ideas like that, are they typically well received? Does it require more explanation? Does it require you, in that case, for example, to show him specifically about what needs to be set up or how he needs to structure things?
Normally, once they buy into the idea, we can give them a series of instructions. And again, this goes back to now discussing who the team is around him. So he should be able to present that idea as this is what I would like to do. Go to the person who's structuring his business, making sure that he's got everything taken care of from a liability standpoint. Go to his tax advisor, make sure he's got things structured to be in compliant with the goal. 95% of all business owners don't even know they have a problem. So how do you solve a problem without a process? So he had a goal, but he didn't know that he could solve it by just changing a few little tiny things. And that's where it becomes important to surround yourself with properly structured vendors and advisors.
So having a structure and surrounding yourself with quality advisors would be two examples of what I'm going to label as a typical mistake made by business owners when they're managing their businesses in general and their finances in particular. What are some of the other typical examples of mistakes that business owners make in that?
Well, most business owners have never made a real, true written succession plan. You know, you think of a small business owner, even 3 to 5 employees, You're helping them pay for their rent, helping them pay for their mortgages, their kids' college, vacations, car payments. That small business owner sometimes reduces the value and impact of what he thinks he's bringing into the community by allowing him to see how much he's magnifying help within the community. Sometimes that could make the business owner now take a new posture of responsibility on what do I do in case I'm no longer here to fulfill those obligations and promises to the people who are helping me build my empire. And it also helps collaborate because now you can express value to those people in such a manner that you can recruit them to help you as a business owner even do more. Sometimes that wall between the employer and the employee is really, really thin. The employer's sponsoring the baseball game and bringing 10 people down to the Angel Stadium. That's really nice. Or he's pulling out the Friday meetings and talking to these individuals, but he's not letting them understand the valuable criteria as well as the opportunity within the criteria to position these people inside of maximizing resources and reducing his obligations. He may have a key person he's never even asked about a promotion, and yet that person is sitting there putting job applications out all over the place because he doesn't think he's valued in the organization. Business owners now put 4, 5, 6 hours into grooming him, training him, and all of a sudden he's going to make an asset for another location. Bringing the group together, and it has to have the identity of the business owner finally releasing the position that he's not the only cog in the wheel. He relies on his resources in order to reduce his obligations. Doing it properly, he can actually recruit an internal succession plan. He can have an employee that's been with him 10, 15 years who he can sell the business to and keep that name and that legacy, that thing that separates business owners from making good decisions. This is my baby. I don't want to let it go. Well, suppose you could just come in 2 or 3 hours a month, do the glad handing, have the nice little open house, and still have it be an identity. You can still be connected without having to be involved.
Do you think that, based on your decades of experience and countless business owners that you have worked with, do many of them come to you with a super clear understanding of what their succession plan is, what they actually want to do with the business? And or how often do you find them coming in thinking they want to do A and they end up walking out with B because they didn't even know B existed?
Again, Norm, that is an excellent question. It goes back to the aspect 98% of all business owners are working in their business instead of on their business. An average business owner will take more time planning their next vacation than they will lay out what the progression and what the advancement and what the changes are of the business going to be for the next 6 months to 12 months. Most business owners are consumed with already the internal chaos, already the internal demands, the employee relationships, the government segments, the taxes, all the stuff that requires that wheel to continue to roll down. And if they could take a minute, step outside of it, so they were actually now looking at something they were managing instead of concerning themselves around owning, they would find that about 70% of their problems could be easily put into the slot so they can now reduce the time, the commitments, and the stress.
So, if I understood you correctly from early on in this conversation, if I'm a new business owner, and I'm not sure how you want to define that, but let's say I've been in business for a year. In many cases, I'm probably not, I may have written a business plan to start with. I am probably straying from that business plan as quickly as within a year. Is that the time that a succession plan should be ideally made early on in the process?
You know, it's my intention to have an individual understand that there is going to be a transition occurring. I own a business, it doesn't own me. And as a consequence, it's a tangible asset I can sell. I would, at the very earliest stages, have that business owner sit down and build the model through a business plan, through a mission statement. What will my business look like? You can go to a dance and there's the prettiest girl in the whole world sitting over there, and you're not going to ask her to dance. So what does your business look like? Is it a pretty business over there that you think in your mind is great, but nobody wants to dance with it. Nobody wants to buy it. So what are you building it for? If you build it and conserve it like an asset, like every other asset, your CD, your 401k, your pension program, any of your rentals that you have an eventuality that it's going to build you some appreciation over time so that you have access to liquidating it at some time in the future, whether it's gold, silver, stocks, bonds. The aspect is I'm planning to liquidate sometime in the future. How come small business owners don't look at their own personal business as an asset? I'm putting in $100,000 a year. What would I expect if that was in a 5% CD? If I can't get that from a modest, unmanaged asset, why am I putting 40 to 60 hours in on a business that I'm making 20?
So Tom, then what you're describing, a lot of it is certainly in this format is very logical. It's very rational. These are thoughts that a business owner or considerations that a business owner should be undertaking. But there is also very much an emotional component to this. As great as it would be if we could just have every business person we interact with operate solely from a rational, logical standpoint, that would be awesome. But that's not also realistic. So, how do you manage those conversations when you are giving advice, when you're creating a plan, when you're asking them or showing them how to execute the plan? How do you deal with the less rational, more emotional side of the equation when you know that that's kind of where they're coming from regarding a particular topic? And how do you ultimately convert that into long-term relationships?
Good question. You got to understand that the actual emotion is generating the passion, which carries that business owner through the times of stress. Okay. It's his faith in himself or what he's doing that is the glue that holds the whole thing together during the most incredibly challenging of times. But we need to counter that with the application of practical. If you ever stop and think about most individuals, the emotion is fine for driving it, but real decisions are made in a balance of the two through evaluation. And sometimes what you have to do is completely kick out the emotion because it'll cloud over what is the most practical. And remember, we're building businesses from dreams. These are people that have got up in the middle of the night with something that was on their brain. They sat down with a cup of coffee at 2 o'clock in the morning, took out that napkin, took out that tablet, and started the mind dream all over 18 pages on the legal pad. And then they're doing it while they're at lunch. And then they're doing it right before they go to bed at night. And they're reading the books and they're looking at the webinars and they're dealing with the webcasts. This is what you can do. And this is all building this momentum to this position where they can achieve it. Well, anybody that wants to go and win a football, scholarship or win a championship understands that there's a tremendous amount of power in that glory dream. But there's also getting in the dirt, sweating, taking that uniform home and cleaning it, putting yourself in a position where you come out for practice because you made commitments to other people on your team, complying with all the requirements, even though you think they are totally ridiculous. There's all the stuff behind the dream that helps power the dream to completion. You can have a 98-year-old kid. I always listen to that story all the time about the 10-year-old kid who's out on the field and nobody will play with him. So he tosses the ball up in the air, takes a swing, and he misses. Tosses the ball up in the air again, takes a swing and misses. Takes a ball, tosses in the air, and takes a swing. And one of the kids is sitting over on the side looking at him going, "You're lousy at swinging." He goes, "Yeah, but I'm a hell of a pitcher." Sometimes that's what we do. We convince ourselves as business owners that what we're looking at has something else that we're benefiting from. And that's good because that's what keeps the dreams alive. It's what we do as parents. We have faith in our children. It's what we do as roommates, as married couples, as friends, as people that join organizations. We have to have the passion to fuel the dreams. But we also have to have the ledgers, the worksheets, the volunteers, the things that actually make the dream come to fruition. And that's where a lot of business owners don't get involved, and they get into that immense volume of burnout that just says, "I'm the only one that's in this dream. I'm the only one that's I'm only one putting in the effort. I'm the only one that's taking care of the aggravated clients because my employees aren't doing what they're supposed to do. I got to deal with the vendors because they're having problems and I can't solve their problems, but I got to use them as a vendor. They complicate all the things in their life because most business owners work desperately to become problem solvers, except where the problem lies, which is in the functional application of making their business an asset.
Well, you, sir, have clearly been doing this for a minute or two because your passion for talking about it is clearly evident in the way that you communicate. I have just a couple more questions, but I want to talk just for a second about individuals as opposed to businesses. So there's obviously some nuanced differences, and individuals that may have a job, they're a W-2 earner and have been working for 30 years. Those individuals, like businesses, need what it sounds to me, and I'm boiling this down from our conversation, some sense of a health check every once in a while. Because we talked about with businesses that they are typically some crisis has happened or there's something impending in front of them they're concerned about that they realize they need to address. And so they seek out that kind of help. In their case, in the case of business owners who are not under any type of duress at the moment, or individuals that don't have any of those same type of concerns other than their future in terms of retirement and sustaining income and so forth. Um, how often does somebody come and have someone take a look at it? How do they even know that what they're doing is working in their best interest? Because one may certainly believe that their model that they designed 5 years ago or the advice they were given 5 years ago made sense at the time, but maybe it doesn't today, but they don't know that. They're just plugging along. So how often does somebody come and take a look at what they're doing?
Our recommendation with a person that's already in the plan is twice a year. Just do a touch base. You already have your inventory, you already have your foundation. Measure it. Is it still doing the same things you were doing? If the stock market is dropping 30% and you moved everything over to a 6% CD to offset that, woohoo! But now if the stock market is producing at 12 and 14 and your CD is doing 2, you should have caught that. You should have had a plan to review that. So being flexible is what you do to respond instead of react to the things in life. By setting up plans, you put in measurements. So when this happens, this is what I'm going to do. When this happens, this is what I'm going to do. You have a complete setup of a response inventory sheet. So now you know what the next step is. Without having something that's already built into the foundation, you're constantly going through a movement of reaction. Reactions means you lost the opportunity, you're responding now out of stress, and chances are you're not making the best possible decision for you.
That makes sense. We obviously are all individually responsible for our financial circumstances, our conditions, and making sure we're doing what's in our own best interest. That makes sense. If I'm a client of yours, for example, and I had moved all of my money into a CD earning 6% because the market had dropped significantly on the stock side, and now I'm getting some guaranteed, I believe you gave a thumbs up, some guaranteed returns, and then that switches. It could be, in theory, 6 months from now before I address that, before I'm even aware that that situation has happened because I'm busy living life. Is that the kind of thing that a client gets from you? I mean, will you reach out to a client and say, hey, I know that we're probably 4 months out from a check-in, but this thing has happened. We should probably look at doing something new.
In fact, again, going back, and that's an excellent situation. So in that scenario that I was looking at, the client was simply using the capital to provide income so they could support their children's college education. That was it. Capital, support college education. Okay.
Okay.
When the interest rates drop, that means they'd have to start taking from the capital. So that changed the direction of what the foundation of the plan was supposed to be. By monitoring that, both myself and the client are looking at that as a component of their whole program. So the conversation would be, right now, it looks like you need about 5,000. So the 100,000 that you've got in the CD, that's going to produce basically the money that we need in order to support the college support program. If it drops, we don't want to take away from the capital basis that we're talking about. We're going to keep some of it maybe into a CD. So we've got some liquidity factors to fund that, but we're going to put some of it into graduated investments now so we can still achieve our overall portfolio goal of 5 to 6%. Can we have a short meeting and we'll show you how to reallocate?
Excellent. Okay, so just two or three more questions. So you deal with lots of people in different financial situations, some early in life, some later in life, all with the desire of helping them achieve the goals that they ultimately have dreamt about or planned for. Tell me what you enjoy most about the process of working with clients.
The light bulb, the light bulb. When you tell somebody something so uncomplicated that they look at it and the next question they have is, wow, I should have thought of that myself. Wow, that's simple. Wow, that didn't require a lot. If you can make a person reach a decision that is predicated and based on the most uncomplicated arrangement because it follows common sense. Most business owners are very common sense people doing uncommon sense activities. I just sometimes look at them and they are the warriors and they're out there all by themselves. They really are. So the first thing we try to do is get people to think about creating a board of advisors for their company. It could be their brother-in-law, it could be their wife, it could be somebody whose advice is trusted because they're reliable sounding boards. Get involved with the people that you're paying already. You got CPAs and attorneys and everybody else. These are the problems that I acknowledge in my business. I want you to tell me what are my practical solutions at the cheapest possible cost. You have the right to do that as an employer. You're employing them. You're paying their Mercedes. You're paying their BMW payments. You have the right to recruit them into your world, create a board of advisors, and let them be there for you. Your employees, go out into your field, go out into your warehouses, go out where they're stomping the grounds and meeting face to face with the clients. Have a lunch at In and Out, and for $5, you can have that employee tell you what were the greatest problems, obstacles, and challenges you had in the last 30 days with our people that are coming in off the street. They'll tell you. You can then introduce that into your game plan, put it into your deliverables, and start implementing things. And it could be something as simple as, well, they're complaining about the chairs because we have a tire shop and they're always dirty and they don't want to sit down on the dirty chairs. And the coffee's been up there for 4.5 to 5 hours and it's not very hospitable. Fine. So what do? We change to a Keurig. That way they can make it fresh. We put clean chairs out there and we tell all the guys that are working in the shop, this is not your lunchroom. Boom. You've solved the problem. You have to apply uncomplicated events to solve the problem. But most of the time, it's kind of like the business owner is thinking, oh, now I got to build a special room. I got to hire a contractor. Now I got to hire somebody to make coffee. My people don't know how to. You get all this stuff and it becomes more of a cluster of complications. So nothing get executed. It's always just a reaction that never got implemented. It's always about responding based on a position of chaos. So just little things like that. And now you stop and you think, like we were just talking, what would that mean to the clients? Now the person who's listening to the complaints, hey, you got any hot coffee here that hasn't been brewing for 10 years and make it a better experience? That shop goes up. It didn't cost them that much to do it. And it could be implemented within what, 24? So these are the things we try to look at in solving most issues. And you know this yourself as a publisher. The difference between having a really good experience and having a lousy experience is 3 or 4 words.
Yep. Yep. That's true. That's true. So I think that you have actually answered what was going to be my next question as well. I was going to flip that coin that on one side said, the thing that I enjoy the most are the light bulb moments. And on the other side of that coin was going to be what frustrates you the most when it comes to working with clients. I think you have just articulated that piece of it as well. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I just have one last question, and no is a perfectly acceptable answer to this question. And that is, what question didn't I ask you, Tom, that I should have?
Nothing. I think you did an excellent job with the interview. We covered aspects of what I do for a living, where I came from, what my motivation was, how I work our process into the program. It is custom, but it is templated and put us in a position where we start looking at What type of work does a person really do when they're advising a client? Do they have the skills to mature all the different areas of finance? How to control debt, how to be involved with insurance, how to manage growth assets, how to expand and consider things for future business growth, how to put yourself in a position where you build that foundation and then you surround yourself with the individuals that can help you accomplish it. I think you did a great job, Norm.
Well, thank you, Tom. I think your advice is invaluable. And I'm wondering for, yeah, this is another question. I'm wondering for the individuals that are out there right now, business owners who may have watched this, are they able to sit down with you and have that initial conversation? Is there any cost involved in that? Or can they just come and kind of spill their guts and you take it from there? How does that work? And what's the best way for them to reach you? Because I want them to talk to you.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm going to go ahead and extend the same courtesy development that you and I had mentioned on several times. Because of the association with your magazine, I will give 45 minutes of free consult for the initial time at zero cost. But they have to be coming from your magazine, refer to your magazine, or be associated with your magazine. That's my best offer. And then they can come in and test the waters for themselves and see whether or not they'd like to expand further. But I think that should be a great value added program that you put as part of the condition of what you're doing with your magazine. My regular billing fees are $4.50 an hour, so it's a good value for them too.
Wow. Okay. I'm so glad I asked that last question. I very much appreciate that, as I'm sure the folks who are watching and or reading will as well. And I encourage them to reach out. I think folks have had an opportunity to see firsthand not only your passion, but clearly your depth of knowledge and your ability to help individuals who have challenges and are not even sure how to really approach them or are concerned that their approach may not be accurate. So, all of that being said, Tom Steele, thank you so much. I very much appreciate your time, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you, Mr. Pelzer.